Thank you for joining us at 7:30 in the morning. So that's why we barely have the speakers on, just to amplify it a little, because most of the people in this amphitheater are asleep, and we're trying to make sure we don't bother anyone's sleep. But I did want to thank you guys for coming. I'm going to talk very briefly and then answer any questions that you have. I know a lot of you are going to go over to the Love Fest happening at the other hotel, so I don't want to eat into that. But I wanted to start, first of all, by thanking you all for coming here from around the state. But I wanted to open up by asking a question. What is it that made you a libertarian? And you can just shout out your answers. Or why are you a libertarian? Atlas Shrugged? Okay. Your dad's a libertarian, second generation libertarian. Ron Paul Revolution, okay. Ron Paul, okay. I was brought to the movement by being proven wrong. So I was 100% on board the idea that the terrorists hated us for our freedom, and we had to go over and stop them. Now, to be fair, I was 19, so it was youth. But watching those annoying libertarians who called it right from day one being proven right was enough to bring me on. And the reason that worked was because I was married to an idea that turned out to be false, and the only people, when I stood there and said, well, wait, who's right here? Then what was the right way forward? The only ones who had an answer that made sense were libertarians. And even when I went on a path of saying, okay, well, let's not do this ad hoc. Let me not fall into yet another, ideology that turns out to be wrong. Let me do some research. As I looked at all the different ideologies out there, I came back to libertarianism because it made the most sense. How many people are here because libertarianism made the most sense intuitively? Yes. Here's the problem. Most people aren't like us. If you haven't figured that out yet, most people don't process things that way. And the frustration we experience is because our way of processing things, of looking at things from a philosophical basis, is not how most people process things. And we often get upset about it, understandably so, because we watch them walking into one trap after the next and not figuring out the pattern. But the reality is that's just how most people are. Most people need to have an emotional tie to something in order to be able to move forward. And so what happens because of that frustration? We get caught up in infighting. Not here, of course. I mean the other 49 state affiliates, they get caught up in infighting. Definitely not here, but that often happens, right? We often get into a blame game. Whose fault is it that they're not understanding liberty, which leads to that infighting? We have a lot of churn in the movement. A lot of people who get in, they're in leadership, they want to move this movement forward, and after years of banging their heads up against a wall, they go, you know what, I'm going to leave it to someone else to do it. And they very often leave the movement. Even if they're still libertarian, if they're still philosophically libertarian, they leave the movement. And so what happens then? People suffer now. People who could be living much better lives are suffering now. My belief as a libertarian, if I'm in an elevator and I say I'm a libertarian, which, why would I do that? But if I say that I'm a libertarian and someone asks me why and I have to explain before the elevator opens, I say I'm a libertarian because I believe people do best when they're most free. I recognize that the problems that we're facing right now are the result of too much power being in the hands of too few people, and we believe that the best way to fix that is to take the power out of their hands and put it back in your hands where it always belonged. Now, because... by the way, you started to clap. If anyone ever wants to clap while I'm talking, I will stop so you can applaud me. Just future reference. No, I didn't. Oh, well, okay. I didn't mean you have to do that in that moment. I'm just saying if this is about you, if you feel like cheering me on, I will stop and let you do that. But so what happens because we know people do best when they're most free? Well, the contrast of that is now. We're not most free, and people aren't doing their best. People are suffering now while we fight each other about why we can't fix this. So after a few years of realizing that there was a problem here, I started looking at what the solution is. Because I want to be clear about something. You're not the only one that's frustrated about this. There was a recent poll that was taken that showed that 87% of Americans are completely frustrated with the status quo. They do not think things are going well. They think that there needs to be a major change. They are not they're completely frustrated with the entire system. Now, if you're like me, the first thing you think when you hear that is, who the hell are those 13% of people who think things are going well right now? But then once you get past that, you realize almost 9 out of 10 people, and this was a few months ago, so it might be 9 out of 10 at this point, 9 out of 10 people know this whole thing is messed up and something is inherently wrong at a structural level. But here's the problem. Most of them are still going to show up and vote for the people who are doing it, because most of them are convinced that the problem is roughly one half of the ruling class, and the only people that can save them from that half are roughly the other half of the ruling class. And that anyone on their side of the ruling class who's doing the exact same things as that side aren't really their part of the ruling class, right? How many of you used to be Republicans or Democrats? Okay, so you remember that pattern, right? Well, they're not a real one of us. And it's like, no, they are. You're not a real one of them. But so the reality is a lot of these people are going to continue voting for the status quo because they think that that's the only way forward. And even worse, some of them are going to realize the status quo isn't for them, but they're going to be pushed into even worse directions. And we're seeing that right now. There are people that are being pushed into communism and socialism. There are people being pushed back into fascism. Things are so bad right now that people are like, I don't know, maybe the fascists were right, because the status quo is that bad. And so it is incumbent upon us to show people that our way works. Now, what's the best way to do that? Obviously, the best way to do that is to go on the internet, tell them that they're wrong, make memes about how stupid they are, call them a bunch of road-cucked libtards, and then walk away victorious. Yes, we're doing the right thing. Carry on. I was really only here to tell you to carry on. No, obviously, as cathartic as that is, it's actually a great way to get people not to be a part of your movement anymore. So when I was figuring out during the campaign and after the campaign, I ran for vice president, by the way. I don't know if you know that, but after the campaign, I thought, well, what's the biggest immediate problem right now? Well, the biggest immediate problem right now is people are suffering right now. And we can try to help them right now. And what a beautiful way to show them how liberty works than to actually show it, not just talk about it or philosophize about it, but actually show them how liberty works. And that's why I started You Are the Power. And the way You Are the Power works in a nutshell is we find people who are in need, we identify the problem, we organize people around getting a solution to that problem, we execute implementing that problem, and then we win on that issue and grow this movement by showing people that statism failed them and that liberty worked. I'll give you an example of that. How many people, at this point I think most people have heard about this, how many people have heard about what we've done in Gastonia, North Carolina with the veteran? Okay, so I'll just go ahead and say that one because usually everyone knows that one, so I'll say it because about half the people know, and I'll use that as an example of what we do. In Gastonia, North Carolina, which is on my side of the country, great town, incredible people, and also a very, very corrupt city council. Again, I know these things don't really relate here, corrupt local governments, but if you can believe that in some parts of the country, local governments are corrupt, just suspend your disbelief for a moment. And in Gastonia, North Carolina, there was a disabled homeless veteran by the name of Joshua Rohrer. And he had a service dog named Sunshine. And what Josh would do, he did not panhandle, he did not beg, but he was well known in the community. He would kind of just walk around in open areas, in parks, and in along the sidewalk, and in areas where he had every right to be there, and wave to people and say hi. And people that knew him would randomly come up and give him dog food and give him money and give him things that he needed while he was trying to get back on his feet. And one day, while Joshua was walking, a police officer came and accused him of resisting arrest. He just got there. First he accused him of panhandling, then he accused him of resisting arrest. He assaulted him. Another officer came and also assaulted him, and then they tased his service dog, who later died. They also charged him with like 24 charges and were threatening to put him in jail for many years. And this city council had a long history this city government had a long history of treating its homeless population this way and its veterans this way. And they fully expected they were going to be able to just run roughshod over Joshua like they had done to so many countless others. But then we found out about it. And when we found out about it, and we found out that there was body cam footage that could prove that what Joshua was saying had happened was correct, that he had done nothing wrong and that they just assaulted him out of nowhere, then we got involved. We organized a community of activists, of libertarian activists across the Gaston County and North Carolina and South Carolina area to get involved. We got the press involved, the local press involved. We blew it up on social media so everyone knew about it. We got it in front of national and international media. And then and this was the important part, we got people to show up, dozens and in some cases hundreds of people to show up to the city council to give them a piece of their mind. As a direct result of that, the body cam footage that they had already fought in court for the better part of 8 months to keep from being released, it got released. The charges that Joshua had been having to raise GoFundMe money to get an attorney to fight were dropped. When the footage was released, we got that footage out there for everyone to see so that people could see that Josh was right and that the police were lying. And so one of those officers is no longer with that department anymore. The other one we're still working on. And the other thing that has happened is now there is a serious push for change in that area to not only change body cam footage laws and not only to change things like getting rid of qualified immunity and getting rid of unaccountability for officers, but there's a growing number of people in that area, a movement of people in that area who understand that this wasn't just about 2 officers and a bad city council. The problem was a presumption of authority that should have never been there and putting way too much power in way too few hands. We grew the liberty movement by reaching people on something they cared about, showing them that there was a way to fix it, and then leading the way and encouraging them to join us. I believe that is the way forward to spread the liberty movement. We have spent a long time trying to create the perfect logical argument and waiting for everyone to see our logical argument and say, my God, this thing is unfalsifiable. I am now a libertarian. We all know that doesn't work. It barely works with us, but it definitely doesn't work with other people. And so the way I believe that we should move forward is to show people how liberty works by bringing attention to things that are actually happening to people just like them, show them the root cause of what's causing that, and show them the solution, and then lead on that solution. And if you would like to join us at You Are the Power, we'd love to have your support. Our website is youarethepower.net. By next week, we'll have youarethepower.com. But as for right now, it is youarethepower.net. We'd love to have you join us. We have over 2,000 activists that are already part of the movement. We'd love to have you a part of it as well. But you can also do this work as part of the Libertarian Party of California. Identify things that are happening in your community, bring people into that issue, and then lead from that. Show them what the cause of that is, and then show them what the solution is, and lead on that issue. And you will bring people in, people who will bring what we call the normies into the movement, because instead of leading from philosophy, we're going to lead from their actual concerns. So with that, I thank you for being here. I'm happy to answer a few questions. I know a lot of you are going to have to leave pretty soon to go to the thing that's happening at the other hotel. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And again, thank you for waking up after last night's party and coming out like 5 hours later for this. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Sure. National divorce? Here's my thought on it. Whether we stay in the status quo of the 50-state, the Union of 50 states, or whether we end up with, a peaceful secession, or whether we end up with a not peaceful secession, or we end up with something else entirely, it's all going to be for naught if we don't have a culture for liberty. So if the reason people are breaking up is because from the country is they don't think that the federal government's going to let them oppress their neighbors hard enough, which has happened in the past, then it's not going to go well. And I think it's less about the mechanism of what our government looks like, whether it's through a secession or anything else. It's less about the mechanism of what's going to happen and more about the culture and the underlying ideas behind that. So I am less and less concerned about electoral outcomes, the what our government looks like from a structural level, and I'm more and more concerned with what my neighbor thinks. Like, let me put it this way. Why do you feel safe right now? Assuming you feel safe. If you don't, let me know, blink twice, and we'll get you help. But if you don't, assuming you feel safe, what is the underlying cause behind why you feel safe right now? That's a good one. So, and the reason behind that is because you have a reasonable expectation that no one in your general area is going to harm you. So let's extrapolate that out. If we want to feel safe or to feel free in the greater culture we are a part of, it has to be because we have a reasonable expectation that our neighbors aren't going to want to use proxy violence against us or direct violence against us. And so I am increasingly... What's that? Exactly. We've lived through the COVID regime. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Right. So and again, I'm not opposed to that. I will say, from a feasibility standpoint, like right now, absent a massive change in the status quo, any attempt at a divorce would not be a peaceful one. But B, here's the other thing I would say, is that, again, my focus, and anyone's focus can be on whatever they want. My focus is on bringing people into a movement for liberty. And whether that leads to national divorce, peaceful secession, decentralization, whatever you want to call it, which it likely would, or something close to it, that's fine. Whether it leads to just a blossoming from within our current system of freedom, of America being the land of the free, whatever it leads to, it will have the underlying reason behind it will be that people recognize that in the same way that they don't think they have the right to walk up to you and just start taking your stuff or telling you what to do because they think that you should, that there's no magical thing that gives them the proxy ability to give someone else that right to do it, and that not only do they not have that right, but that it doesn't work well anyway, that it leads to the bad outcomes we're experiencing. So that is where my push is in building a culture of freedom based on people who may not philosophically be attached to any kind of ideology, but inherently understand that it works best for them when they and everyone around them is most free. So, thank you. Hey. 100%, yeah. Just helping people, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and thank you. One of the reasons that I started what I'm doing with You Are the Power was there was almost a sort of quiet resignation. We may not actually achieve liberty in our times. We may not move the needle that much. We might not even be able to stop the needle from continuing to move towards more and more statism. And if that's the case, then what am I supposed to do? Other than like meme about it, because we got that covered. I will be memeing about it regardless. But what else can I be doing? Well, there are still people that are suffering that I can help. And there are still people who are in need that we can help right now. And there are still people who are being harmed or neglected or abused by their local government that we can help now, if nothing else. And if everything's falling apart besides that, then we can help them. I very quickly realized that if we're doing that, it attracts people to the movement, and we might actually have a shot at this thing. But if nothing else, then we're helping people in the meantime. When we helped Joshua Rohr to not end up in prison for many years for the crime of standing on a sidewalk when the wrong cop had a hair up their butt and decided to kill his service dog and ruin his life, he now is in permanent housing. He now has a job. He now has another service dog. His community has rallied around him, and he's now a respected member of the community where they understand that he did nothing wrong, and all the slander that was put on him by the DA and by the police, that was wrong. In that same town, a pastor who was running the only homeless shelter in the county that they shut down because they wanted homeless people to die so they could get federal funding to solve their homelessness crisis that they just created by shutting down the homeless shelter. We drew attention to that. And as a result of that, that homeless shelter is open again under political pressure on the city council to drop their bogus actions they were taking against the shelter, and we rallied the community. We were able to get multiple trailers sent to them that they're now using for additional housing and for educational facilities. We raised something close to $20,000 on one initiative just to help them with the funds they needed to feed people. We're helping people now, and we suspect that will bring people, we're actually watching it bring people to the Liberty Movement. Worst case scenario, nothing changes on the Liberty Movement front, but people are being helped that wouldn't have otherwise been helped, and we're doing it our way. We're doing it through voluntary cooperation and solutions instead of through coercive force. We're saying, here is a problem, and not you should vote for this new tax or this new program, but here is a problem. That is the reason for the problem. That thing, that appeal to authority that everyone else is making is the reason for the problem. We have an actual solution that involves us fixing the problem. And if nothing else, we've done that. So, any other questions? Hey.
You mentioned that 87%.
Yeah. I think it's why there's a rise in American nationalism. I think it's why there's been a rise in thoughts on social, people believing in socialism and communism. It's people who are saying, I am done with the status quo. This thing, this sort of centrist republicrat thing that's been going on for the long time, this sort of neoconservative, what they call the international rules-based order, this isn't serving us. And especially after the COVID regime, a lot of people realized they had always thought, okay, this politician needs to be removed, this one needs to be put in, or this one needs to be the majority leader instead of the minority leader or whatever. But the system itself is relatively good. And I think what happened is after the COVID regime, a lot of people, whether it's that they thought that the COVID regime was a destructive and horrific entity, or they thought it didn't go far enough and it's why so many people died is they didn't do enough, people realized there was something wrong with this and that they needed something better. And we need to be the ones that are there showing that we have the way to fix this. Because if we don't, some really, really bad ideologies. This is not the first time that the status quo has been disrupted and people have been desperate. And if you look historically, they move to reactionary movements. We are a proactive movement because we have a foundational solution for this. The other movements are reactionary and lead to horrific things. People didn't decide on Leninism and Marxism in Russia because things were going great. People didn't look at a psychopath who was screaming on a stage who had just gotten out of jail for attempting a violent takeover of the government because things were going great in Germany, right? They look at that because they go, that's worth a shot. Something's got to give here. And so people are going to be pushed towards other ideologies if we don't show them that our way works. And we can't do it by appealing to logic. I know that might break some hearts here, but we can't do it. Those movements are not appealing to logic. Socialism does not appeal to logic. It appeals to emotion, and it appeals to frustration and desperation, and it does it well. We can do it better because we can do all the same things they're doing, appealing to people's concerns and emotions, and our way actually works. So we can do that and bring people to liberty that way.
How do we show people who are saying, okay, you got some great ideas, show me that it actually works?
Right. So that's what I'm doing through You Are the Power. So the best way to show someone that something works is through the contrast of what's not working. And so we use these examples, these causes, like Joshua War or like a lady named Suzanne Alfalabi, who in Indiana, her home burnt down. She was living in a trailer that her insurance company put on the property while the home was being rebuilt. The zoning board decided they were going to use that as a flimsy pretext to steal her property. And so they started fining her like $7,000 a day for having 2 residences on the property, even though one of the residences had completely burned down. And they had done this many other times. They had taken out entire subdivisions this way. Then we found out about it. And she, long story short, she's in her home. That zoning board has been deposed, and the people of that town are looking at whether or not they even need a zoning board, because they're a relatively small rural community. Why do we need zoning? That community was never going to think about whether or not they needed zoning until, in contrast, they were shown that ability, that giving these 5 people this ability to decide what you can do with your land, led to them stealing property from people. And that the contrast to that was to just let people do what they wanted. There already is some level of state law. You can't, build a nuclear bomb on your property yet, but you can't do that. I mean, listen, I ran on legalizing recreational plutonium, but we might not be there yet. But the contrast of a status quo that if you would ask someone before that, do we need a zoning board? Well, yeah, we got to make sure people are using their property right. Oh, yeah? Well, let me tell you about Suzanne Al-Falabi, and here's how you can help her. After we did that, well, now they're likely not going to have one. They're actually fighting the state to say, we don't actually want one. I know we're required to have one, but we don't want one. And that could lead to a chain reaction throughout the state of people saying, I don't think the government should tell me what to do with my land. But we had to show them the contrast. People recognize that there's a better way, but they first have to experience enough dissatisfaction and frustration with the status quo to know that there's a better way in contrast. Because we don't live under, our ruling class has come up with a pretty good way to give us a very nice gilded cage to live in, so that any alternative sounds very scary. So it's incumbent upon us to show them that cage is a lot scarier than they thought it was.
Okay, so I get that. There's some zoning board that full respect for authority and they can use it, those should work. But how do I stop someone from buying property next to a high school and opening up a strip club there, and now I can't go to the strip club without seeing the dog?
Right. Yes, that's a very specific problem. But so the answering that on a general thing, not everyone is going to buy into your idea immediately. But you might, at the very least, get that person on board with fighting with you on this one issue. And they agree with you on that issue. And now you get them on another issue. I am less and less concerned with convincing people of stuff. And I'm more and more concerned with giving them something to do with their idle hands, so that over time, through the network effect, they're working with libertarians to do liberty stuff. Now they're working with libertarians to do this liberty stuff. Now they're working with libertarians to do this liberty stuff. All the while, they're just talking to and with libertarians the whole time. And if they don't decide to just, end it all after that, and stay with us, they become libertarians over time. I mean, how many of you were a lot less libertarian when you first got into this movement? And over time, you become more libertarian because you're around a bunch of libertarians, and we just say stuff that makes sense. And imagine if you're connecting that with action that produces results and shows that it works. That person will be convinced maybe 15 causes in. And if nothing else, if they remain your opponent on the idea of zoning, then you just leverage your opponent to accomplish 15 things, if nothing else.
So let's pretend for a second that you actually convinced us to take some action.
Yes.
Pretend that we're not all equally careful enough.
Right.
How would you suggest we find those causes? Do you have any tips on how to find those causes in our community?
Well, step 1, 2 through the end step is join You Are the Power, because we're doing all that stuff. So the way You Are the Power works, now, and I'll answer your question, if for some reason you go, I hate You Are the Power, and I'm not a big fan of you, but I do still want to do everything you just said, I'll tell you what you can do. But what You Are the Power does is we have an entire team of people that basically drink from the fire hose of tips that are brought to me every day. We get on average, I get about 500 messages a day. And they are a combination of things, but it's a lot of them, probably a couple dozen a day, are leads and tips on causes that we could work on. And we have a team that does nothing but vet those causes and bring them to our team of activists across the country and organize it by region and work on developing and finding solutions and organizing the community around those problems. So if you want a one-stop shop to do this, join You Are the Power, and we'd love to have you be a part of it. If you wanted to just focus on that locally and do that, the best way to find out these causes is to show up to your local city council meeting or your county council meeting or your whatever it's called here. Right? They're called different things in different areas, but your local government meetings, because it's likely that you will have one person showing up and plead their heart out about something that's being done to them or being done against them or whatever, and they will stand in front of a stone-faced council who could not care less but has to give them that time to talk about it, and who is fully safe in the knowledge that no one else knows or cares, and they let this person say their thing, and you can find out about it. That's actually how we found out about we came in on the Joshua Rohr thing in Gastonia, but it was our activists who were there at the council that found out about Pastor Moses Colbert and his homeless shelter. We would have never known that. He wasn't getting any press, but he was showing up and saying, "You've shut down a homeless shelter. 24 homeless people have died. I kept a single homeless person from dying in this county for the better part of 2 years, and now they're dying left and right. They're going back into addiction. They feel like they're been abandoned. Just let me put them back in my church again, please. And I don't know why you're doing this." That would have continued to fall on deaf ears if our activists hadn't been there to find out about it. So if you want to get involved, it's happening right in your backyard. You just don't know about it because they don't publicize it. They don't want you to know about it. So if nothing else, you can go there. But that's short. The quick way to do it is join You Are the Power at youarethepower.net. Thank you. Any other questions, or do you just want to continue your breakfast in peace? Okay. Yes, so the way that we do that through talking about drug legalization and decrim is on a specific issue, showing how a woman, for example, a lady who is in her 70s and has taken chemotherapy and her body is ravaged by it, and the only way that she has an appetite is through cannabis, or through another example that we've had is a homeless veteran. Or not a homeless veteran, a veteran with PTSD and traumatic brain injury who was suffering from a intractable, worsening, and drug-resistant depression and thoughts of suicidal ideation, and is now on psilocybin and is doing fantastic and is living happier than they've ever lived before. And we take those cases to people because the libertarian argument of drugs should be legal because you don't have no right to tell me what I put in my body and I have no right to tell you what you put in your body, that sells here. That does not sell down, well, that's a bunch of libertarians too, but that does not sell with the people who are trying to sleep right now. That does not sell with the average person, because as soon as you say that, what they hear is, I don't care that there are people dying of overdoses on the streets and they're homeless because of drug addiction, and drug dealers are taking over communities because of all the money they're making from selling drugs. I don't care about that. I have the right to my body. That's what they hear. And they think, wow, that's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. And it's not what we said, but it's what they hear, because when they think of drugs, they think of all the problems that are being caused by drugs. So what we can do is show that, A, there is help that can be done through the proper use of drugs, but B, we can also show the abuses of it. So we have also brought attention to things like no-knock raids, which are a direct result of the drug war, civil asset forfeiture, which is a direct result of the drug war, and we can thank Joe Biden for that. And specific examples of abuse that happened with the underlying reason being because of the drug war. And again, going back to what he asked about, some of them will say, yes, I agree with you on that. I agree with you that someone who's in need should be able to use cannabis or psilocybin. Yes, I believe that the police shouldn't be able to take your property without you even being convicted of anything. Yes, I believe that the police should at least have to knock and announce before serving a warrant. But I still worry about drugs. If you can bring them down the line, cause after cause after cause, over time you will soften them to the reality that the drug war is causing more problems than drugs themselves are causing. And if nothing else, if you never get them on your side, then you've taken a pro-drug warrior person and helped leverage them to accomplish causes that you wanted. But yes, we do work on that as well. Yeah. So we work with, so there are two things. We work with legal teams who help represent people in court. We don't do that, but we do have partners that work on that. We have people that will they'll have their own campaigns for office or for a referendum. We don't really we don't get into campaigns. We're not a PAC or anything like that. We're a 501c4 nonprofit. We do dabble a little bit in the being pro referendums on things, but we have to be careful of that for legal reasons. We focus on bringing the story to people's attention, organizing them around that, and then letting those other movements and other groups do the other parts of it. So I'm someone standing up and saying, and I'm running for city council because we need to decriminalize psilocybin, and I'm running on the vote yes on SB2 or whatever that decriminalizes psilocybin or ends no knock raids or whatever. We let them take that next step on it because honestly, for a lot of legal and ethical reasons, we really don't take that next step. Or if there's an attorney that wants to help represent someone. But what we do is we bring attention to it, we organize people around it, and we create that groundswell to then push for the next thing. So we build up a grassroots, get them organized, and then get them connected with coalitions of people that are doing the next and final step. And our idea is to bring people to ideas and to help people in the immediate. We also do a lot of charitable work. And the whole idea is to bring people into the movement through things they care about. I'm sick of arguing with people about things they either don't care about or disagree with me on. I want to find something we agree on and work on that. If we do that enough times, it builds a network effect, and they eventually join me because they recognize that I'm right and that we're working together already. So, thank you. Sure.
What's the role of the National Libertarian Party and particularly as somebody who's participated in one national libertarian political campaign? I mean, the local issues are awesome, and I mean, it seems very logical that that's the focus of a lot of the liberty movement. What's the role of the National Party and national campaign?
Sure. So the role of the national party is the same as the state and local parties. It is to it is to put up candidates for office, to get ballot access so those candidates can be on the ballots that they need to be on to run, and to organize campaigns to try to get them to win. I know that's controversial, but that's what a political party does. They can also be involved in activism, and I think it's good that they do that. The National Libertarian Party is a partner that we work with on issues, and we work with state and local affiliates as well on issues. But I believe that it is the role of activists. And you can be wearing multiple hats. You can be wearing your LP hat for campaigns, and you can be wearing your You Are the Power hat, or your whatever your organization is, or just you as an individual doing activism to bring people to the movement. But I think that the purpose of a party needs to be to run people for office, because if you try to use a political party and have it primarily act as an activism movement, then there's no reason for it to be a political party. There is a lot of expense and resources put specifically into creating an organization that is legally allowed to run candidates for elected office and get ballot access. If we're not doing that with that as the end goal for that organization, then it's like using a battle tank as a school bus. Like, a battle tank is great as a battle tank, and yeah, you can put some kids on top of it and take it to school, but it's not the best way to do that. It's not a good way to organize. If we're going to do activism, we need to do that through an organization that is built for activism. I think that the best way that in the model of what I'm building for growing the liberty movement, the best way that the Libertarian Party at the national, state, local, whatever level, that the Libertarian Party can utilize what the work that is being done is to be there on those local issues, and then to cultivate and run candidates on those issues who can win on those issues, whether it's city council, people running for president, and everything in between. I recognize that because we are the size we are, that very often the White House race in particular, that specific race, becomes, at least for now, a messaging race. But it still has to be a race that is trying to win. Because the second that you say, hey, look, we're not going to win, 99% of people are going to stop listening to you that very moment. Because the first thing you have to answer if you're running for office is, why should I vote for you? And if your answer to that is, well, I mean, I'm not going to win anyway, and we're not even really trying to win, I just want to let you know something, your answer to their very first primary question is, you should not vote for me. Which to them also means, you should not listen to me. And there's nothing else that you need to take from this conversation. So I am a strong believer that if you are running for office, whatever your chances are, your role, your goal should be to run to win. I knew what my odds were when I ran for vice president, but I got up every single day running as though I was this close in the polls and that we were going to try to win this thing. Because otherwise, why should I get people to try to listen to me if I'm running for an office that I've already said I'm not going to win? And taking that out to the role of the party, why should anyone listen to a political party that goes in by saying, yeah, we're not going to win this thing? Okay, great. Why should I listen to you? They shouldn't. So I believe that's the role of the party. The party should be running candidates for office to try to get them elected and get them the ballot access they need. And we as libertarians, whether it's within the LP or outside of it, need to build a movement so that that actually works. That's my belief on that. I think we have multiple tools. LP is one of them. We should use the LP for what it's supposed to actually be.
So, have you partnered with any organizations that might left wing, right wing,
Yo, absolutely. So when we were in, I'll use Gaston County in Gastonia, we had the Gaston County, and if for no other reason, they didn't want to lose the initiative to us. Because we came into their, I'm from Myrtle, I'm from about 4 hours away in Myrtle Beach, and it looked like all these people came from South Carolina, even though most of the people that were actually showing up were from there. But it looked like some out-of-towners were coming in to deal with this issue, and so very quickly the Gaston County Democratic Party, the Gaston County elements of the Gaston County Republican Party, because they're the ones in charge of the city council, but the elements of the Republican Party, the North Carolina Republican Liberty Caucus, a union of 36 churches in that county, groups that weren't even political, all came together to work with us on this, basically with us as the lead because we had done all the lead work. So they fell into their roles wherever they could. We were working with Democrats, Republicans, and libertarians of all stripes. We had Mises people, we had classical liberal caucus people, we had those weirdos who don't really care about factions and just want us all to work together. We had those people, we had everyone in this movement. Because it wasn't a partisan or ideological movement. It was, this thing is bad, we're going to fix it, and here's the best way to do it. And so no, we work with everyone. I mean, just about everyone. There are probably a few people there we wouldn't work with, but we work with pretty much anyone who wants to be involved in this. We will work together. Because again, even if they remain thinking bad ideas on everything else, the worst case scenario is we leverage them to help us win on a cause. We took our political opponents and used them to help us win on a cause that mattered to us. So with that, I would like to thank you again for coming to this breakfast, and I will be here all weekend, so if you haven't had a chance yet, please come up. I'd love to get a chance to talk with you this weekend, and thank you again. Keep fighting for liberty. Love you all. Thank you.